Today we're continuing in the series God's Work Through Paul. This is part 6. Part 6. We're going to continue where we left off last week. And last week we were at the point where Paul was in Jerusalem and his third and last visit. And we were in the point there where a mob had gathered together and basically wanted to do him in for sure. So a commander of the Roman garrison stepped in and stopped it, and this is where we are then, and I'll read those verses again just right quick like here. Acts 22. Acts 22. This portion today, as some of the others obviously, they've all been very much a matter of a flow of a story of Paul's life, what he experienced, where he went, timing and various things. Some of these things are interesting to some, not as interesting to others when it comes to maybe dates or maybe where an individual is. Everyone's different, so that's good, that's fine. But one of the primary things here, even though it is a story flow and not like other places where Paul wrote Romans or Ephesians or Corinthians and some of the others where you can kind of expound upon different principles that are good for us as far as our way of life and how we think and what we're doing. This here is just more of a story. There are things we can glean out of it from time to time as far as lessons or things to be learned from it. Probably one of the greatest ones is that we have it pretty easy. Sometimes when we think we have it pretty bad, we don't have it bad at all compared to what they went through the first several centuries. They were persecuted constantly. So it's totally different now, thankfully for that, for us. In that respect, we're getting ready to go into a bad time, but what they had was unique to them, and God molded and fashioned them. They had different experiences than us. And so people experience different things and different things through time because God has different things to mold and fashion within his people. But another thing coming through this is there's a lot here written about Paul. You don't find that about Peter. You don't find it about James. You don't find it about John as a whole. They wrote things in Scripture that we read about. But this is a story about him in large part. And perhaps, for whatever purpose, it's helping us to grasp certain things about what they did go through, what they lived. But it is about Paul and how much God used him. And it's quite incredible. You look at all the books he wrote, he was used in a very powerful way to establish truth, to establish doctrine for the church for the next 3,100 years. Awesome, nearly. So it says here in verse 27 of Acts 22, then the commander came and said to him, tell me, are you a Roman? He said, yes. The commander answered, with a large sum I obtained this citizenship. And Paul said, but I was born a citizen. So again here, this is where they were getting ready to scourge him, flog him, beat him, if you will. And it was against the law to do this, someone who hadn't had a trial. And so he got a little afraid, candidly, because to do something like this, to go against the law that was there, wasn't a small thing. Then right away, those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman and because he had bound him. Then wasn't even supposed to do that. Incredible. The next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. So this is the beginning of him trying to discern, make judgment about what was taking place, why it was happening. Then chapter 23, verse 1. It says, then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day. Then the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Crazy things that happen here. I'm going to interrupt you a little bit here. The book has quite a bit about, and I don't believe it's any coincidence whatsoever, about Judaism. And I might as well just plug it in here. Can't help myself. I've been wanting to get this out there before it gets printed. But I'm excited about this. I really am, because of the book. I told Laura that I remember a time when we were at the refreshing program in Pasadena. It's when they used to rotate ministers in from all over the world, most of them obviously out of the U.S. coming to a classroom setting in Pasadena. We would be there for 2 weeks. Different evangelists and different ones would get up and give things that were pertinent for the ministry, and perhaps news of the work, different things going on. And one time we were there just after Herbert Armstrong had written Mystery of the Ages. It was printed. He brought it in with him, came in there, kind of a surprise visit because he didn't come in that often to the classes. And so we were blessed to have that opportunity. And he was so excited about Mystery of the Ages because of all that God had given to him. For him and his life at that time, it had come together. This was the product of all that, what he had been shown, what he'd been given, and able to write a powerful book in that respect. And I'll be candid with you, I have the same kinds of feelings about this book. It's far beyond anything that I've ever written in that regard. It is a progression of things that have brought us to a certain point in time of all the things God has revealed to this period of time. And to be able to write about those is quite unique. And I wouldn't have done it except the fact that so many people, different companies out here kicking us off because you can't talk about World War III, the book that's out there. It's pretty tough to keep it advertised, if you will. And just to have something out there for perhaps planting a seed, because God definitely is not calling people into the church. This isn't that period of time. And I think we should all understand that and the reasons why. So anyway, because of that, finally, different book, different title, something that can be out there. And then the subject matter. Anyway, it's boiling down to the book being titled something to the effect of The World's Greatest Cover-Up. And then underneath that is about the Messiah. So it's about things that happened in Judaism and to show what began in Judaism because both are being addressed. Jeremy thought it'd be a good idea to bring them into it since I mentioned it in part of the writing of something I sent to him to review. And so anyway, started focusing on some of that about Judaism and what happened in Judaism because that's where the cover-up began about Christ and what they did and the treacherous things that went on and why they changed Passover and how they changed Passover in their observance because it was a gradual thing and very deceitfully done. So anyway, then it goes on to talking about that in Christianity as well, what took place in traditional Christianity. And I'm calling it traditional Christianity as a whole. Most of the time, most people are familiar with that. And most assuredly, once people start reading it, they're going to know what I'm talking about when I say traditional Christianity. But what an awesome thing to be able to share at the end here, just before Joshua returns, and to give those things that happened over the past 2,000 years and what brings us up to now and why, and to have that kind of truth out there, to me, is exciting. So to what degree, if it's planting seeds, that's awesome. Because you look at the news nowadays, just like I wasn't going to go through any news, but because it's a story flow, I have tended on occasion to get through it a little quicker. And have probably surprised some that checking your watches to see what's going on here. And so I thought, well, I'll have some news today. And I was dumbfounded by how I hadn't been paying any attention because I've just been focused on writing. So to look at some of the news, I mean, I caught some glimpses here and there of what's happening with the tariffs and some of the things having to do with the stock market here toward the end, yesterday and Thursday. But really wasn't watching it very closely. Then I went through all the news that had been sent out and dumbfounded what's going on. I mean, it's like, to me, candidly, the way I was struck this morning as I was going through some of that, generally we get a particular type of thunder at one time. We've got several thunders going on at the same time. I mean, and then the book of what it's coming out with when it starts coming out, because it's going to come out on the website first, as I've done it in the past, chapter at a time. And I think chapter 1 will probably be 2 weeks away. We'll see what happens. And then I've got several behind it because, like I said, I'm up to 5 and I'm pushing them through. But you can't push them through too fast. A lot of work to be done. But you think about what's happening in the world and the thunders that are out there. It's like, is it going to be able to finish it? I believe that's what's going to happen. But again, things are so bad out there. They really are. And we need to be alert to that and grasp what's taking place in the world and be sobered by it as well. And so here it is, where Ananias, the high priest, made the comment, told him to be struck on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You talk about some tenacity. I mean, he was very vocal about before he ever went to Jerusalem, if they kill me, they kill me. In other words, he understood his life was in God's hands. If that's God's purpose, so be it. He was ready for that. And so he wasn't afraid to call a spade, to speak out and say something to this effect, and calling him what he was. Because probably as you go through some of the book, even to grasp the treachery that was involved in what Judaism did, it was really horrible. And to see that in a bigger picture, this is a good example of that kind of thing. They had always followed to a certain point. I don't want to go through it because it's in the book. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and yet you command me to be struck contrary to the law. Awesome. He knew it inside and out, the Old Testament, in that respect. And he was taught by Gamaliel. And God had planned all this. This is what is amazing. This didn't just happen. His training, and I'm sure probably from youth, everything he went through to make him the person he was going to be, because God was going to have someone that was going to fulfill this role to establish much as far as going to the Gentile world, God's plan and God's purpose, and all those church areas that he would be writing to that would have doctrine, that would have things that were for the church for the next 3,100 years, nearly. Awesome to understand. And so God molded and fashioned all this and gave him that kind of training, that he was taken there to be taught at the feet of one of the greatest teachers in that respect, known at that particular time. And so that's why he goes through some of this and some of his history. So he's saying, you do this contrary to the law. You talk about, you're the high priest in essence, and you're the one who tells something to be done to me that is against God's law. So those who stood by said, do you dishonor God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. So, I said before, but anyway, the reality was he knew he was one of the rulers, one of the leaders there. Perhaps obviously didn't know that he was a high priest, but anyway, all this is coming out. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out to the council. This is amazing. Sometimes things that came up like this. Christ did it. Pharisees, Sadducees pit against each other. Here, Paul uses the same thing. Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee. Well, right away, you set the stage. Tell everyone there, because he knows there's a lot of Sadducees there, zealots, different ones, because by this time, Judaism was fracturing into different groups. Those were the three primary ones. There were others as well. Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope of the resurrection of the dead, I am judged. Well, right away, even stronger in that respect, because he's bringing out what the beliefs of the Pharisees are, and the Sadducees don't believe that way at all. They don't believe in a resurrection of the dead. So already you think of the vast difference of what had taken place in Judaism since the time of their last prophet. Amazing. Now, when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So now, rather than putting more on Paul and being so much against him, here they're getting into a little bit against each other. Amazing. And the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say there is no resurrection, neither angels, they don't believe in angelic beings that God created, nor spirit. So you think, what do you believe in? Anyway, but the Pharisees profess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees party arose and protested, saying, we find no evil in this man. Amazing. But if the spirit or an angel had spoken to him, let us not fight against God. So they're using a little reasoning at least there and with what they believe. And so he's saying, they are saying if this happened, then we can be found to be fighting against God in this. Now, when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the garrison, because he had a responsibility of protecting him, taking care of him, because he was a Roman citizen. Verse 11, but the following night the Lord, present by him, as the word didn't, sometimes I get so irritated, especially writing some of the book here. There are so many mistranslations and things they've done on purpose at times because they had this preconceived idea, and you think, how can you do this? We know about the cross, that there's absolutely no word in the Greek language that translates there is into cross, or you could use for an X as an example, but that isn't the word that's used throughout the New Testament. And you think, they did it on purpose. Mind-boggling, and that runs throughout Scripture in that respect. What an incredible thing. God helps us to see it because he reveals his plan to us. We begin to understand, we see, we grow. Awesome. So it said present by him, whatever that means for sure. Don't know exactly what that means. Present with him probably is what it's about, because they tended to think that he's appearing at different times here or whatever. And as a whole, God hasn't really been working that way. Christ hasn't been working that way. And it makes it very clear that he is in a particular location until his entire house has been reconciled, speaking of the church of God, to him, to God. And that's atonement. That's Leviticus 16. And the example of what the priest did when he went into the holiest of holies. And he didn't come back until the job was done. And then he came out. And it's all about Christ and what he's doing and has been doing for the nearly last 2,000 years. So, in essence here, talking about this as far as what it's saying, the Lord, speaking of Christ, present by him, present with him, I'm sure is the correct translation, but again, said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. Now, again, he wasn't fully present with him. By the power of God's Spirit, he can be present right up here and give you what you need, communicate things to you. That's how every one of us was called. God communicates his Spirit to the Spirit essence in us. And we're able to know things, to understand things. And there's understanding given in that respect of things we didn't know. And so God can communicate this in the same manner. And so he said here, for you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. So now he knows he is going to go to Rome. He absolutely, he has more strength in that, more confidence in that. It's that as we've been reading about, that's been his desire anyway, was to go to Rome, to be with the people who had been called back in Pentecost, and obviously knew about the group that was there, so he had this longing to be there as well in the Gentile world. Verse 12, then when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they'd kill Paul. Now, I'm sure they cheated because they didn't finish the job. So at some point, they had to break their oath. This is about an oath made to God. This is how much they were so radicalized in things they believed and believed God was on their side, as is today in the world. People have different beliefs. And anyway. Now there were it says, now there were more than 40 who had joined the plot. I mean, how many do you need to carry out something like this? But I guess in case anyone tried to stop them, they felt they could overwhelm. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves, separated unto destruction. The word is anathema. That's basically what it's about. Separated unto destruction. Whatever happens, we're ready to die, in essence, to accomplish this, to kill Paul. And so now they go to the leaders, if you will, and share this with them. This is what we're ready to do. And of course, just as they wanted Christ dead, now they want Paul dead, and so they're happy about this, obviously, that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now, therefore, you with the council suggested to the commander that he be brought down. So in other words, go suggest to him, to the commander, that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you're going to make further inquiries concerning him. So they want them to be a part of this because they're the only ones that can request Paul's presence and to make more inquiries. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near, before he gets here. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the garrison and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to make this known, saying, "Take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me, asking to bring this young man to you. He has something to tell you." Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they would inquire more fully about him. But do not trust them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for a promise given from you." In other words, in the context, to deliver him. So this is what they're waiting for. So the commander let the young man depart, giving charge to tell no one that he had revealed these things to him. Then he called for 2 centurions, saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers." So if they're 40, we're going to make ourselves ready for them. 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen. So he's going to take him away. That's what it's coming down to, and not give in to that and take him into the city or farther in to where their council was going to be held, and basically to go to Caesarea. So prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea in the third hour of, this was in the third hour of the evening, in other words, around 9 p.m. So they're doing this at nighttime so that this doesn't get out. They'll be on their way, well on their way to Caesarea. Caesarea up by the coast north of modern-day Tel Aviv and between there and Haifa. It says, "And provide mounts to set Paul on and take safely to Felix the governor." So this was a garrison. It was in Jerusalem, but it wasn't the primary headquarters for the Roman government. In essence, it was over the region of Judea. It was in Caesarea. Verse 25, "He wrote a letter in the following manner: Claudius Lysias," so this is the tribune, the commander of Jerusalem, he's the one writing, "to the most excellent governor of," so this is of Judea, "Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman." So he's kind of helping himself too, because that's his job to protect him, being a Roman. And because of what happened earlier, what they nearly did, stop that. So he's trying to turn everything around and do everything right, because his head could be on the chopping block because of something like this, truly. "Now, when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before the council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, which, candidly, the Romans didn't care about, period. They had more problems with the Jews and the things they went through, and so it goes on to say, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews would be lying in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell." So in other words, he's letting Felix know that he's already sent word to these on the council to come up to Caesarea to make these allegations before Felix. Verse 31, "Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul to bring by night to Antipatris, the city between Joppa and Caesarea. The next day, they returned to the garrison, leaving the horsemen to go on with him. And when they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. Now, when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. So when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers also have come. Then he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium, right there in one of the main halls, the areas where they were. Trying to think of the expression they use in other translations, but this is where it was. Acts 24, verse 1. Now, after 5 days, so it took a while for them to get down there to let them know and for them to plan and get their act together of what they were going to do and how they're going to do it. Their so-called, if you will, legal team type of thing to come up and make this presentation before Felix. So they're preparing for that. And finally, after 5 days, Ananias, the high priest, came down with the elders and a certain man named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, seeing that by you we enjoy great peace. You read stuff like this, it's almost like you want to barf because he's trying to butter him up and all the things that sometimes people do. But anyway, and probably smart on their part. But anyway, going on. Seeing that by you we enjoy great peace. They didn't like the occupation. I mean, he's lying right there. They hated the occupation. There were uprisings continually that had gone on against the Romans at different times there. And there's a big one coming up not too long after this. Anyway, seeing that by you we enjoy great peace and good administration has been brought to the nation by your foresight. I mean, absolute liars. That's why sometimes you hear things on the TV nowadays. It's always been that way, but it's worse nowadays, where you hear different politicians get up and say things, and you think, they're lying. They know they're lying. Twist and distort, that's what it's all about. We accept always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Liar, liar, liar. I'm sorry. But that's what he was, an absolute liar. Nevertheless, not to interrupt you any further, I ask you to hear our words briefly in your fairness. Smooth talker. And I'm sure Felix was wiser to some of this kind of garbage, but at least he was being respectful to him, and that was all he basically cared about. Verse 5. For we have found this man a pestilence, who sets in motion incitement among all the Jews throughout the world. That's pretty big. Setting incitement against everywhere he goes. Stirs up the Jews. And is a ringleader of the sect called the Nazarenes. He even has gone about to profane the temple, whom we seized, and would have judged according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by, and with much force to take out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you can take knowledge of all these things which we accuse him. Now the Jews also agreed, maintaining that these things were so. Then, goes on here, Paul, after the governor had nodded for him to speak, answered. So now it's Paul's turn. And these are just summaries of what was said, obviously. Inasmuch as I know that for many years you have been a judge of this nation, I do the more confidently answer for myself, because you may know that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. So he's giving him a timeline here. This is all longer I've been there, 12 days, and look what's happened. Now they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, neither in the synagogue or in the city. Now, can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me? But this I confess to you, that according to the way, it's amazing how often they speak this, because this was common expression being used in the regions. And he knew of this. He knew what he was talking about. That according to the way, which they call a sect, Isn't that amazing? Things don't change much. So I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead. So he's still hitting this thing about, as far as the Pharisees' belief, not Pharisaical, the Pharisees' belief. And so it says, there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I came to bring contributions and offerings to my nation. So this is the different times that Paul writes about that he sent things there, or he's gone with it to bring it down as he did this last time. In the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me having purified in the temple, neither with a mob, nor in the midst of tumult. In other words, a large crowd, outburst, or whatever the people. So this wasn't happening. They should be here before you to object if they had anything against me. So who's come up here? Not the ones who would be able to say anything, give evidence and so forth. They're just making accusation. Or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any matter of wrong in me while I should be before the council. Or rather, it is for this one statement which I cried out standing among them concerning the resurrection of the dead, that I am being judged by you this day. So is that the reason I'm here? Because of the belief of a resurrection of the dead? Because that's obviously what stirred up the Sadducees even more so. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision in your case. So again here, he has knowledge of some of these things, and some of the story continues on later on here and talks about some of this, the different ones. Some of these leaders of the Roman Empire, especially around the area of Judea, they knew the history and what had been going on, things about Christ and the group that followed and so forth. And then Paul, that was in even other areas. These things, this news traveled around. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. So gave him quite a bit of freedom there in that respect in the area of the Praetorium. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. So he wanted to know more. That's what it's talking about up here in the context. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. Incredible. So how this was given to be written here, to be known, maybe we really don't know. God just inspired it, gave the reality that he was afraid, let it be known. Don't know. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So many nations are like that, where they want a handout, they want something in order to make a judgment. You think, kind of padding a little bit so it's a good judgment in your favor, that he might release him. Just a custom in some regions. It's business in a lot of places in the world. Doesn't happen unless there's money passed around. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. So whether it means he was literally bound there or just bound where he was, sometimes these words are used interchangeably, and unless you know exactly how it was done, some places talk about chains, some places talk about leather straps, or they have them, how things were done. Some of it's just in an area that you're bound to this area. You're restrained, if you will. It's more about restraint. So at this point, Paul has been taken to Caesarea after having gone to Jerusalem on Pentecost. So this is a period coming up past that. And so this is 58 AD. Then he is kept by Felix in Caesarea for 2 years. Incredible, that long. And you think, well, court cases are kind of like that nowadays, except back then you think travel was much, much worse, but things can drag out sometimes, and this was certainly dragging out, which is leading up here in this particular case to important events that will happen in the fall of 60 AD. So going on here, chapter 25, verse 1. Now when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they made request of him, asking a favor against him. So all this time, and now a new ruler in the area, and this is still very much on their mind. They want him dead. Asking a favor against him, that he would summons him to Jerusalem, so they could lie in ambush along the road to kill him. Didn't go away after 2 whole years. They're still wanting to do the same thing. Just treacherous. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept in Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly. Therefore he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man, to see if there is any fault in him. So he would judge it to see if there's any fault, but let those come down as well to Caesarea. So when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. Then the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. Then when he arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. So they didn't have any evidence, just complaints. In defense, he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. So they're beginning his defense. But Festus, it says here, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat. So now he's using this again, because the reality is he knew about the plot, obviously, that happened 2 years before, knew the motivation of what they wanted to do. Christ had already let him know, you're going to be witness for me in Rome. And so he stuck to his guns as far as what it was to be brought before Caesar, because a Roman making that kind of statement at this particular time went beyond his authority. And so he had no choice but to send him. That's what it was going to boil down to. So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So again, stating it, and the reality is they couldn't come up with something that they could say he's worthy of death as far as the Roman law was concerned. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go. So he's telling the council, no, this is what's been stated and this is where Paul's going. Then after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. So King Agrippa was a Roman ruler over other areas of the region, larger, and from all indication and what's been written about him, more authority in that respect, came to pay regard to this Roman ruler, neighboring Roman ruler. Although, again, the title gives evidence that Agrippa had a greater power and prominence. Verse 14, when they had been there many days, Festus set forth Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. So it's all this time, basically their only desire in Jerusalem, the leaders there, was to have him put to death. And so just keeps going on and on here. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face. And this has been given room to answer for himself, and has been given a room to answer for himself concerning the charge against him. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. When the accuser stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I had supposed. So again, here are things in his mind, why they're doing this, why this is so bad. And so he's expecting something totally different. So he's saying, not even what I had supposed, but had some question against him about their own religion. So this is all that they could come up with. It's just about their religion. It has nothing to do with something worthy of judgment in the sense of what's taking place here as far as Roman law is concerned. And it was about a certain Joshua. So this kept coming up over and over again, obviously, who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. Now, because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul talks about here being appealed to be reserved for examination by Augustus, so he's letting him know again here, he appealed to Caesar. So to Caesar, my hands are tied in essence. I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. Chapter 25, verse 22. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. So he's interested in what's taking place. He wants to hear what's going on. And he has a background here that perhaps motivated him even more so to want to hear what Paul had to say. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great ceremony, pomp, ceremony, and how they were to present themselves, and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus' command, Paul was brought in. Then Festus said, King Agrippa, and all the men who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. So again, it just keeps coming out. They want him dead. He's not fit to live. And it's like, what has he done? Nothing has yet come out. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. So it's like, I have to send him. He's appealed to Caesar, but I don't know what to write. Kind of in a predicament. You go to all that expense, going to send a force with him to be escorted all the way. It's going to cost. And why are you doing this? Basically, is what it's coming down to. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. So in other words, after you hear this, and you say, tell me, then surely I'm going to be able to send something to present to Caesar. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him. Some of that stuff is really insane when you go through a story like this. And then Agrippa said to Paul, you are permitted to speak for yourself. So Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself. I count myself blessed, King Agrippa, because today I will answer for myself before you concerning all the things which I am accused by the Jews, especially because you are knowledgeable in all customs and questions which have to do with the Jews. So he already knew this about him. Therefore, I ask of you to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was spent from the beginning among my own nation in Jerusalem, all the Jews know. They knew me from the first. If they were willing to testify that according to the strictest sect of the religion, I lived a Pharisee. So now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers. So he keeps going back to that history that's theirs in the Old Testament, into which our 12 tribes in earnestness serve night and day, hoping to attain. For this hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused by the Jews. And then it says, in most translations here, Why should it be thought incredible? That's not even in Scripture. Should it be thought incredible is not even in the Greek. So basically saying, why judge it unbelievable by you that God raises the dead? Indeed, I myself thought I must do many things against the name of Joshua of Nazareth. So he knows that he has knowledge. I believe it comes out here. His wife is, I think, Jewish, who's with him. He has the knowledge of this region. He's been there for a long time. He knows their customs. He knows of their religious beliefs. And to be ruling over it, he has to understand many of these things and knows the history of things about Joshua, so he knew the name. And so he says, I myself thought I must do many things against the name of Joshua of Nazareth. This I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints I shut in prison. So he's acknowledging what he was like and what he did. Having received authority from the chief priests. And when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. So again here, bringing out here, a lot of these things aren't, you pick up a piece here and a piece there, but it's making it clear that what they were doing even back then, led up to the point of Stephen's death, and this was in that first year then, before he was finally called by Joshua himself, in that respect, blinding him and the like. But in this particular case here, it's talking about that what he went through in that respect, that he shut in prison many and then put them to death. So it wasn't just about Stephen, or we don't know how many were killed, put to death, that he gave his approval of. And he wasn't the only one going out and doing this. There were others doing the same thing. So again, I think about us and things we go through. And we have no one chasing us like that whatsoever. People out to want to kill us and the like. And, you know, we have it so easy compared to what they went through. The beginning of the church, the start of the church, and things they went through is absolutely incredible. So verse 11 says, also, I punished them often in every synagogue and compelled them to blaspheme. So in other words, that was a technique, if you will, and has been used by peoples, military, rulers, law enforcement type of things to get someone to acknowledge something, beat the tar out of them, make them say what you want them to say. That's kind of what it comes down to. So I compel them to blaspheme. And being exceedingly enraged against them. So again, he's just telling it like it was, which reflects everyone else that did the same thing. They were so involved in what they were doing, they were so zealous about that, they had such hatred for the church, for people in the church, for Joshua, and then the followers afterwards. So it says, and enraged against them, I persecuted them even to foreign cities, in which, upon going to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests, at midday, O king, along the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. Then when we all had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So now it's using a proper translation, as we talked about in the past, that it wasn't. So again here, reiterating the entire story of what happened. So I said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Joshua, whom you are persecuting. But rise and stand on your feet. So again here, the ability of God, the ability of Joshua, being where they are. We tend to think of places and time and presence in a physical way. This wasn't happening that way. There was that power. There was that ability to do it. There's that ability, just like Moses in the burning bush and the, sound, voice coming out of it. You think, we're not accustomed to that kind of thing in that respect. We think someone has to be there doing it, and it's like, no, God can do it from anywhere with anything he wants, and this is an example of that in that regard. So he says, I am Joshua, whom you're persecuting, but rise and stand on your feet, for I have appeared to you for a purpose, to make you a servant and a witness, both of the things which you have seen, and of the things which I will reveal to you. So he's letting him know, this is the very beginning. We've gone through this incredible story. I will deliver you from the people, as well as the Gentiles, to whom I now send you, to open their eyes, to turn from darkness to light. So again, here, he's just reiterating a story now that he's already lived. In the beginning, he hadn't lived it yet. And now he's looking back and telling them about it. This is what I've lived. This is what I've been doing. To turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. So the Pharisees believed in that power of the spirit world, of angelic beings, of Satan, if you will. And then the Sadducees didn't, but he's telling it from the Pharisees' standpoint. And then telling about what Christ had given him to do. From the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among those sanctified by faith into me. So that's what Christ is saying, that Paul's job is going to be. And then he goes on in verse 19. Therefore, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision. When you experience something like that, and it has such an impact upon you that all your thinking, you begin to understand and see things because God is giving it up here to him to grasp what was taking place. And he responded accordingly. Yeah. What's incredible, again, God prepared him for that moment in time. Awesome. I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but declared first to those in Damascus and in Jerusalem and throughout all the region of Judea and to Gentiles to repent, turn to God, and do works meet for or worthy of, in other words, repentance. For these reasons the Jews seized me in the temple and went about to kill me. Therefore, having obtained help from God, I stand until this day, witnessing both to small and to great, saying nothing other than what both the prophets and Moses said would come. So, again here, standing on exactly what had been given to him. It's all out of the Old Testament writings. Their job over and over again was to expound on things written in the Old Testament about Joshua, about the Messiah, and things that would come to pass. And he's letting them know this is all I've been doing, what we were given from the prophets and Moses, that the Christ would suffer, that he would be the first to rise from the dead and would proclaim light to the people and to the Gentiles. So he's letting him know this is more than about what's taking place in Judea. I've been going to the Gentiles in different regions. This is what God has given me to do. Now, as he thus made his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad. So anyway, he knew that he was intellectual. He knew that he was smart, and he was presenting all this. And it's like he's telling him, kind of out of your mind. Oh, this is too big a story. But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak the words of truth and soundness of mind. For the king, before whom I also speak freely, knows these things. For I am persuaded that none of these things escapes his attention, since the thing was not done in a corner. So he's letting him know, I know that you're the king. You've been over this region, and you know everything has been happening in this region for some time. Knows about Joshua, knows about some of the things that were taught and the like. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? So you think, why would he? Well, anyway, I know that you do believe. So it was given to him to know this, to understand this. Perhaps some previous knowledge, don't know, but he definitely knows it. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. So went past this part of being mad down to here now. And then Paul said, I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today, and the rest of this is really bad translation. Uh, when it says we're both almost and all together, it's an expression basically, I'm just going to read it as it is. I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today, but also all who hear me today, being even in few, even in many, such as I am, except for these bonds. So, in other words, his desire was for others and be as he is. In other words, the knowledge, the ability, the mind that God had given to him, the knowledge that God had given to him, except for his bonds. Verse 30. When he said these things, the king stood up, as well as the governor and Bernice, of those who sat with him. And when they had gone aside, they talked among themselves, saying, This man is doing nothing deserving of death or bonds. Then Agrippa said to Festus, This man might have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. So that's what he would have done. He would have set him free after that encounter, but he's already appealed to Caesar. In essence, my hands are tied. So on to Caesar he was going to go. We'll continue on with that next time. I do want to go through some news today. I thought I'd share something else with you. First of all, I shared about the book, some things about the book, and the advertising we want to do there. I think we're going to have an ability to, at least at the beginning, so we're going to try to go big to get as much out as we possibly can before some backlash might come this time. Before, with the other book, we started out slowly and gradually built it up, and then we gradually started getting kicked off and going back and forth with them, different ones. And this time here, going to go about it in a totally different manner in that respect, and going to put a lot into it. God has given us a lot, and so we're going to use a lot, in essence, to do this. Even with what we're doing on this particular scale, if I wanted to just share some of this with you, I thought I'd just share two of them, Facebook and Reddit. There are a couple of others, but one hardly has anything on it whatsoever, and it's a spinoff of people still sending stuff around to each other. But anyway, I'll go with Reddit first, with what we're spending there. And I'm not going to go into that right now, maybe do that later, but we're probably going to quadruple to maybe 10 times the amount being put into this once we start this. So once the book is able to be sent out, we're going to hit it with a lot. And I think that would probably be, it's going to be a unique thing because timing is very possibly everything right now and what God's doing. So we follow a course. And just like I was talking about reading some of the news here, thinking, what's going on in the world right now? There's such insanity. And there are buttons being, in the sense of pushing people's buttons. We're not to the button yet, but it's getting closer there. But Europe, I think what's going to be next to turn them more against us, because it's growing so fast, the sentiment, to where it's almost, as it were right now, starting to turn into a hatred toward this country. That's mind-boggling. You know, we know things, God gives us things, but to see them coming about in the manner that they are, it's a little mind-boggling. Anyway, Reddit. I'm going to be giving two examples of things here. One's called impressions, and you can help me with this. Impressions is just how many times it goes out and people see it, right? So it's in the advertising. An impression, you see the advertisement, and basically, we used to use Google and words. People had word searches, so we had a lot of words out there that we'd put out there. Google got so bad, and so it just got impossible to use certain words, this woke thing, whatever it was. And so we just quit them. It was turning into a full-time job just working with Google. So that, bye-bye Google. So I started using some others where we could. We were on Pinterest, got kicked off that. I'm trying to think of another one that was really going well. I think that we got kicked off. But anyway, two here that have let us remain on most of the time. We did get, I think, kicked off of Facebook a couple times. But it's a different type of ad. It has the part of it like the picture of a book and just certain things to grab attention that are said in the ad. So anyway, I thought I'd give you on Reddit here impressions. Uh, Generally, it's running anywhere per week between 2,100,000 to 2,500,000. I'm sorry, 2,100,000 to 2,500,000 per week impressions that are going out there. But as far as click-throughs, people see it, but then very few percentage-wise click through. So the ones that actually click through, it's running from 8,400-ish to 10,000 week by week. So anyway, that's been ongoing for some time, and it pretty much runs that because it's based a lot upon how much you actually put into it. But at least there's a audience or people out there that have come through. What they've done, we don't know. We still have people on a regular basis we know who are actually going to Amazon and buying the book because we said a long time ago, I think it states it on the book or wherever it's stated, that all proceeds, everything profit is going to go to other organizations. 2/3 of it, or 3/4 of it goes to Tunnels to Towers, and 1/4 goes to Feeding America. So anyway, just to have it out there so people can't make false accusations or whatever. This is to help other people, and it's about the message. Anyway, Facebook. As a whole, impressions are running from, they do their impressions a little bit differently, and I'm not sure how to compare these because in impressions, they're close to Reddit, but it's a different system. Anyway, around 2,100 to, 2,100,000 to 3 million. But the link clicks, when people actually go to the site, has been running from like 61,000 up to 77,000 or 78,000. So a lot of exposure in that respect, but I'm looking forward to the time we can get the next book out there and hit it as hard as we're going to hit it with the things that are there and planting seeds right and left. So, and what God does with it, we'll find out. But I feel like it's going to have a huge impact at some point in people's lives because everything that God has taught us in this particular age, PKG, that's brought it all together, this is that message. So to me, that's exciting and inspiring. Few of the articles, go through some of the news. China is taking war to Earth orbits. A space Pearl Harbor is on the way. It's just kind of mind-boggling to see how journalists, how reporters are reporting on different things today, and to see the things that just keep coming at us in the manner that they are. It's incredible times. It says, with our commercial assets, we have observed 5 different objects in space maneuvering in and out and around each other in synchronicity and in control, the U.S. Space Force commander, a general said at a particular meeting in Virginia. That's what we call dogfighting in space. They're practicing tactics, techniques, and procedures to do on-orbit space operations from one satellite to another. The recent demonstration of Chinese dogfighting capabilities in space is an indicator that Beijing means to use force on Earth. By targeting sensitive U.S. military satellites, the People's Liberation Army can render us deaf, dumb, and blind long before it strikes. So it's like, we know what's coming. There's a war coming. It is going to be with China. Nobody's mincing any words anymore. They realize this is out there and still play these games with tariffs, and you throw these tariffs at us and we're going to throw some back on you, and like it's going on. But it's all leading up to one thing in time here. And the time is in God's control, obviously. Then it goes on to say the Chinese are evidently planning to blind not only America's military, but also America's civilian society, which is heavily dependent on space assets. Almost nothing in modern America will work when the Chinese are finished attacking in the heavens. A space Pearl Harbor is at hand. Incredible. Another article here. Indirect negotiations on nuclear issue possible. Iran finally replies to letter to Trump. Then the next report comes out and says, Iran rejects direct negotiations with the U.S. in response to Trump's letter. Something's on the way with Iran. That's pretty much set already. Military options not off the table, Trump says on Greenland after Danish PM's criticism of his administration. It's these things here that are really stirring up people. Fair trade, it sounds like a good thing if that was possible, but to do it all in one big whack may not have a very good outcome. Everything is going in a certain direction, and God's allowing it for a purpose and a reason, exactly in the manner that God wants it to. We are close. U.S. moves more stealth bombers to Indian Ocean base in striking distance of Iran and Yemen. They're getting ready. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it, truly. I hope all of you have seen some of the articles and different things happening or heard some news on TV to realize when they start sending certain ships in a certain direction and some of the talk that's going with it, some of the rhetoric. Another one here. U.S. won't bother defending Europe from Russia, leaked Pentagon memo says. This is what they believe. They're beginning to believe this more and more. It's so set in their psyche now that it's just the way it is. This is what they believe. We're not going to go to their rescue no matter what happens. Trump threatens to bomb Iran unless they end nuclear weapons program and begin talks on a new deal. Another article. Iran's supreme leader responds to Trump bombing threat. Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei warned the U.S. would face a strong retaliation if President Trump follows through on his threat to bomb Iran over the nuclear dispute. Big words, but they have to be worried, obviously. They know the ability to go in and take out all kinds of oil facilities, refineries, movement of fuels and the like. Plus that, anyway. In a statement on Monday, Khamenei stated, if they commit any mischief, they will surely receive a strong reciprocal blow. I'm sure that makes people shudder to think what they might do. I'm sorry, but I'm being a little facetious there. Because the power of the two is, the only potential there of problems is from Russia and or China. Another one here, it says watch, and then it says Elon Musk and Doge official exposed disturbing Social Security fraud involving illegals. I don't know if you hear some of these things, but you think some of the stuff that's going on is so mind-boggling, and you think to threaten to take away people's money, and what was it, they're even talking about congressmen now looking into this, how some of them got so rich so quickly. Anyway, I guess I'll read it. It says here, we started at the top of the system, mapping the whole system of Social Security to understand where all the fraud was. And there were a lot of great people there who showed us really a lot of waste. And so that came with a big list of stuff, but this is what jumped out at, jumped out at what? Where's my rest? Oh, it's on the back. I ran this off at the hotel and it put it on the back. Okay, I'm there. Really jumped out at us when we saw these numbers. We were like, what is this? In 2021, you see 270,000 people go all the way to 2.1 million in 2024. These are non-citizens that are getting Social Security numbers. Some of the stuff that goes on, how is it even possible? The accounting, I don't think there is such a thing, period. Just sending it out. Anyway. Oh, here's the one. Elon Musk reveals Doge's new target, members of Congress who got strangely wealthy. That's so much fighting, and why they have to fight in the manner that they do. They're trying to preserve something, save something. They don't want it looked into. I'm really glad I didn't get a Tesla right now. You think all the stupid things that people are doing out there, taking out their rage, you think people are so nuts. It's just insane what's going on. Another one here. Which Iranian missiles and drones can wipe U.S. base in the Middle East off the map? Kind of an awkward thing there. This is from Russian news, in essence, but these things that sometimes are thrown out are not fully baseless. Just because it comes from there doesn't mean it isn't news, or at least particular aspects. It says the U.S. has over 60 bases, garrisons, and shared facilities dotting the Middle East, from naval support activity, Bahrain, home of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, and Al Udeid Air Base, CENTCOM's headquarters, forward headquarters, to other naval, air, and ground facilities in the Gulf, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. In the event of war, all would be in range of Iran's missiles and drones. So just throwing it out there that they have an ability to strike those bases, and that's what they're going to do if something begins to happen. Iran, another article here. Iran threatens to target U.S.-British joint base in Indian Ocean if Donald Trump, ... Iran vowed to launch a preemptive strike on the Diego Garcia military base in the Indian Ocean before the United States uses it to target the Islamic Republic, the Telegraph reported. Diego Garcia is the main island in the Chagos archipelago, something like that, the UK-owned Indian Ocean territory. Citing a senior Iranian official, a report said that military commanders have been asked to target the joint US-UK base, which sits on Britain's Chagos Islands, as Tehran aims to deter Donald Trump from striking the country. The official told the Telegraph top commanders are being urged to launch preemptive strikes on the island and its base if Trump threats have become more serious. Discussions about the island have intensified since the Americans deployed bombers there, the official added. As per satellite imagery, at least 3 B-52 Spirit jets arrived in the strategic US-UK outpost last week. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but they carry a lot. And a lot of damage can be done to refineries and so forth, and a lot can be done to nuclear sites where they think that this is going on. They know where it's going on. It's just a matter of being able to have the ability to go deep enough to destroy. This is probably just around the corner because they're preparing for it. Here's another article. Buckle up. It's about to get ugly. Indeed, our proprietary crash trigger is now on red alert. The trigger went off before the 1987 crash, the tech crash, and the 2008 great financial crisis. So I think of all these thunders that are going on out there right now and what happened yesterday and the day before, but especially yesterday in the stock market and the NASDAQ, all this stuff going on. You think there are people panicking and it's a blurb, but get enough blurps out there and when it all comes together, it'll come at the time it's supposed to. Another one here. Hegseth circulated secret Pentagon memo on preparing for war with China. Some of these things that get out there, there's nothing hidden anymore that somebody else isn't going to make sure it makes its way out there. It says over the weekend, the Washington Post revealed that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth distributed a memo in mid-March which ordered the Pentagon to prioritize its war planning focus on potential future conflict with China. The memo, called the Interim National Defense Strategic Guidance, outlines in broad and sometimes partisan detail the execution of Donald Trump's vision to prepare for and win a potential war with against Beijing, and defend the United States from threats of near abroad, including Greenland and the Panama Canal. Some of the stuff. It's nothing new that the Pentagon considers China a top-pacing threat, but it does confirm that the Trump administration would likely be willing to go to war in the event of a mainland invasion of the self-ruled island. War, war, war. And people are preparing for war. And they all know that this is what China is doing. Russia is talking about, was it last week here, they came out with new parts of their fleet and so forth. Crazy stuff. They're wanting everybody to know. Denmark squandered defenses arming Ukraine with little left to defend Greenland. Some of this is just nuts. But if they feel some of this or are so outraged at this country and you make certain comments and talk about military as possibly on the table, you've got to be in their shoes and think, what on earth? Not only will they not come to our defense, but now they threaten different ones and so forth, and they're totally fed up with it. The hatred just grows. That's why the fifth trumpet event, not hard to see. We're not that far away in the sense of their thinking over there. I just hope that when we go across the border still, it's not going to be bad. Germany launches first permanent foreign deployment since World War II, and it's on Putin's doorstep. Germany has launched its first deployment abroad since World War II. The country's parliament said troops will be sent to eastern Lithuania, which is NATO's eastern flank. The unit is to be fully operational by 2027. It will be the first time German troops have been serving abroad permanently since the Second War began. I'll tell you what, in reading through some of these things this morning and thinking about some of the timing of various things out here, you look at the complete picture of everything that everyone is saying, and it's a little mind-boggling. It really is, in the sense of thinking where things are, how much time is there, and you realize Europe is never, they're iron mixed with clay. And that just screams right now. They cannot make sound decisions. They're all fighting against each other. So they don't have cohesion in that. The only thing that brings them together is bitterness and anger and backlash at this country right now. And one day, that's what happens. 10 finally agree. They've had it up to here. It only takes these 10 to do what they're going to do, who have the power to do it. Incredible. Doesn't mean they have to be unified. Doesn't mean they have to be strong. It just means they have the power to do what God says they're going to do. Another one here. Crisis in Sweden as nuclear bunkers are ready for World War III clash. Another one here. Finland joins other Russian neighbors exiting from landmine treaty. I don't know if you've heard about some of the landmines. I believe it's Poland on the border there with Russia. They're talking about all the landmines they plan on putting out, and others are thinking about doing the same thing and breaking treaties by doing it. You think that it's not real to them that they believe Russia wants to come in and roll over them? This is a real fear. And so they are the ones who have to make decisions. What are they going to do to counteract it? Another one here. Europe's plan to ditch U.S. weapons spooks Pentagon. Right. NATO allies pledged $20 billion in military support for Ukraine, says Secretary General Rutte. Rutte, I think is how you pronounce his name. You think $20 billion. That's so small, it means nothing when it comes to war. Trump rolls out sweeping new tariffs. Trump said Washington would implement kind reciprocal tariffs on all countries amounting to approximately half of what those nations charge the U.S. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base and break down trade barriers abroad, he vowed, noting that ultimately this would mean lower prices for consumers. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it's not going to happen anymore, Trump concluded, adding, we're finally putting America first. All this is working. You know, before he came into office, it's like, how is this going to work now? And even before, who is going to win? And if whatever happens, it's because this is God's purpose. God is allowing it. Or even more so, more direct part of making sure that things happen in a certain way. Because it's about judgment on the world at the end of 6,000 years. And God is going to execute judgment. And this is a part of it. And so if God intervenes to work with various nations to bring about what he's going to bring about, it is righteous, it is just, it is God Almighty who does it. And put an end to some of the stupidity and the evil that exists in the world before Christ is ushered in. Awesome. EU Commission may close European market for U.S. goods. So this is how they're talking. We're just going to close the markets. Now, would they do something stupid? Well, yes. Is it a possibility? Anything's a possibility. They are mad. And when you make people mad, people don't always use common sense, which isn't used much in the world anymore anyway. Brussels is considering the possibility of using a full-scale arsenal of measures, including restricting the access of American companies to the European market and public tenders. This was reported by a source in the EU. In response, the European Commission is considering tough measures, including imposing tariffs on American goods, restricting access to European financial markets, and even banning American companies from participating in EU-funded projects. So you think they're mad? However, if the U.S. does not abandon the new customs restrictions, Europe is ready to act without red lines. Another article here. War with Iran, almost inevitable, being reported out of France. Gulf states refuse to let U.S. bases airspace for Iran attack. So, anyway, goes without saying. Goldman, so why are they even making the comment? Because they know that there's a buildup taking place and there's talk and rhetoric taking place, and at some point, it's quite obvious they're going to go after Iran because they're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon. That's where they are. Gulf states refuse to let U.S. bases airspace. Okay, I read that. Goldman's. Another one here. Goldman Sachs, well, Goldman, I'm sorry, panics, saying this is much worse than expected. Burma earthquake death toll now at 3,085 as humanitarian crisis worsens. You think about weather, all over the world, everything's happening, all these crazy things. It's like boom, 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 everything all at once. And this is something we have kind of watched for and been told that as time goes on, the thunders will happen simultaneously more and more together and more powerful. Awesome. A blow to the global economy. We don't want to see these things happen. It's not that, but we understand this is a part of the process that God says is going to happen for a purpose, because it's a matter of mankind being humbled. And it takes a lot to humble human beings. And even then, God makes it very clear that as a whole, most are not going to be humbled. They're going to continue fighting. They're going to continue trying to destroy once it starts. And God's going to put a stop to it. Who couldn't be for that? I don't care who they are, what they are, if they're doing it, that is one answer. It is to take care of it before a new world is established, before God's kingdom is established. What an awesome thing. To get rid of all that fights and resists and will not surrender in the sense of attitude and spirit and will not cooperate. So it has to be humbled. Another one here. A blow to global economy. World leaders react to Trump's tariff onslaught. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described the universal duties of a major blow to the global economy. She claimed that the new 20% U.S. tariff on EU would see uncertainty spiral, causing dire consequences for millions of people around the globe. The move will trigger the rise of further protectionism, von der Leyen argued, warning that the bloc is prepared to respond. If you take on one of us, you take on all of us, she stated. She's very prominent. She's also waiting for sentencing because she's been found guilty of some things, but she's a very vocal individual in Europe, and people listen because this is how they feel. I don't know what is going. What's that? Yeah, I know. So some people won't get all the recording later on loaded up, and that's fine because I know what I forgot to do. When you put a new SD card in, you're supposed to get rid of the old that's on it and make it a brand new card. And I forgot to do that. So I was wondering why I was blinking, and then it hit me. You fool. I forget things every once in a while when it comes to this stuff. And I definitely forgot that today. If you take on one of us, you take on all of us. Echoing her remarks, European Council President Costa said a trade war between the EU and the US would affect everyone and called Trump's decision a major economic mistake. And it doesn't look real good. It is putting a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and it's causing a lot of upheaval in the world. And if you don't care about the rest of the world, there's a way about going about some things that I got to be careful. that can be done, still be accomplished, but to be done in an easier way, a smoother way, and yet perhaps some feel they can't do it that way, and that's fine. But the spinoff of it, you've got to be willing to pay the price. And we're headed into paying the greatest price because this world economy is a mess anyway. And this does not help. And it stirs up things because if you start wrecking the rest of the world economy, great for the United States, we can think. But what about the rest of the world? If you don't have a good global economy, you're cutting your own throat. Drop 1,600 is U.S. stocks worldwide, sell off, blah, blah, blah. It's more than that. Fear Trump's tariff could spark recession, wipes $2 trillion off U.S. stocks. China strikes back, slaps 34% tariff on U.S. goods after Trump's Liberation Day. How do I put this? One thing that has often been taught is that tariff and trade wars like this lead to real wars. And that's where we are in the world. It's like, how do you handle it? How do you deal with it? You can't anymore. Macron calls on French companies to suspend investment in the United States. This attitude, they're getting more worked up all the time. Western Europe hates Trump. Develops war strategy for Ukraine. That's from a Hungarian PM. NATO needs roadmap for U.S. pivot away from Europe, says Finnish defense minister. It's like, where are we going to go? What are you going to do? We need a roadmap. Putin launches largest military call-up since 2011 as Europe rattles sabers. The world is a mess. So what an incredible thing. Here we are about to take Passover, days of unleavened bread, and seeing the world in the shape that it's in. Sobering times, truly.